So I just got to see Godzilla -1, the brand new Godzilla film that is coming from Godzilla's home country, the country where this property was born and flourished. Of course, I am talking about Japan, and this is a Godzilla movie that's coming out at a time where we get a ton of Godzilla movies made here in Hollywood. We have the Monsterverse, Godzilla, Godzilla vs. Kong, whatever the hell this thing is. But coming from Japan, we have this new Godzilla movie that just puts all of our American Hollywood Godzilla films to shame. It honestly puts every single monster movie that has come out over pretty much, I would say probably like the last 20 years to shame, because Godzilla -1 is absolutely phenomenal. This movie is fantastic, and I cannot say that enough. This movie was so surprising, and it was so good in every single way. It felt like a movie that came out in the 1970s and was an absolute classic. Like, sitting down in the movie theater to watch this felt like I was sitting down in my, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, my grandpa put in an old VHS and said, "This was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid. Here you go, son." Like, that's how this movie felt. It felt so warm and so loving in the best, old monster movie type of way, and it was just so perfect, and I have a lot to say about it. So Godzilla -1 takes place in post-war Japan, post-World War II, where Japan is pretty much destroyed. You have all these people that are suffering from PTSD, trying to put their lives back together, and we follow this main character who was a kamikaze pilot who didn't, do his job as a kamikaze. He ended up running away and rejecting the fact that he had to die for his country, and because of that, he feels a lot of guilt and a lot of anger, and there's a lot of stuff that also happened that I won't spoil, revolving around the Godzilla character that has really added to his torment, and he sort of has to live on in this world, and he's trying to start this family, and it's a really emotional and amazing character study early on in this film. You take Godzilla out of the first half of this film, the film works. It really, really works, and this study of post-war Japan is something that we haven't really gotten a lot of films of. It's something that I know a lot of people wanted after seeing Oppenheimer. It's something that I've seen animated stuff like Grave of Fireflies, where that's kind of during the war in Japan. There's a really interesting time period that I think really makes for an interesting story, and this film tells that story. The character work here is phenomenal. You easily love and care for every single character, specifically our main character in this story, and you grow to just love them and want them to succeed, and you feel so strongly for them, and I love the themes of this movie. The entire movie is about learning to love life and accept the will to live. You know what this movie actually reminded me of? This movie is probably the closest thing we'll get to a perfect live-action Attack on Titan. And I know what you're saying, this has nothing to do with Attack on Titan. Well, yeah, you're right, but from a thematical sense, you have this world in which, that's been kind of destroyed. You have a group of people who are suffering, tormented, and then you have this gigantic monster that comes and destroys their homes, and they truly have nothing to live for at their core, right? They should just give up and lay in, but there's this hope for freedom, for life, for peace, and they fight. And you know what? The themes there are shared in both of these projects, and I really love it. But overall, all the character stuff in the first half of this movie is perfect, and they set up the eventual, coming in of Godzilla, this character who is the title character, who comes in. It's done so perfectly, and Godzilla in this film is a force of nature. He's not just a gigantic anti-hero monstrosity of CGI like he is in the American films, but he's more like the shark from Jaws. He's just this mysterious force of nature that's destructive, and Godzilla is really just a representation of the themes of the story, of this terrible thing that has beholded our characters and this nation. Godzilla, honestly, if you take this movie, you take Godzilla out, and you put in a war, or you put in Titans from Attack on Titan. It could have been literally it could have been a shark from Jaws, dinosaurs, literally anything, and it would have worked, because the story and the themes here are so good and so well written, and the characters and their arcs are so well, thought out, that it doesn't really matter what the actual central, evil was that they had to overcome. But in saying that, Godzilla is a fucking tank, and he's awesome. This ginormous force of nature, and the CGI, which I think some of it had to be done practically, because it just looked way too good, especially on that budget. It looked so realistic, but what was CGI looked really good, and he just looks like this animal, this disgusting, badass animal. It is just so sick. Every time he came on screen, the theme, which I'll get into in a sec, that kicking in, the destruction felt punchy, the sound design was amazing, and then God, that heat ray, guys. My lord. I heard Jeremy Jahns talk about it, and he mentioned that it was kind of like the Death Star, and I sort of feel that, but that heat ray is probably the punchiest and most incredible thing I've ever seen in cinema. The first time it was shown in the movie, this was literally my reaction.
Oh, it's beautiful.
But Godzilla legitimately poses a serious threat, and every time he actually appears on screen, you feel that threat and you feel the excitement of the scene. But at the same time, when he's not on the screen and you're facing the characters and you're just watching them live their lives in this interesting setting in Japan, this post-war Japan, the movie never gets boring. It's constantly great because they understand that at its core, the first thing this movie is a character movie. Although it's called Godzilla, the movie's not centrally about Godzilla. The themes and everything in it are about the characters, what's going on in their lives, the traumas of their past, the PTSD from the war, everything going on, and looking towards the future and appreciating life. That's the themes. You throw in Godzilla just to fuck their lives up and throw in, like, make a story out of it. But Godzilla is not the central theme of the story, which is what makes the movie work. And once you understand that as a filmmaker or a writer trying to make a monster movie, when you understand that the monster is not the central theme of the story, that the monster is just a piece of the story to help the characters fulfill their arcs, then you can actually have a great movie. And that's something that the Hollywood movies, fail to understand, which is why we have this new trailer for Godzilla and Kong, the CGI monstrosity number 5. Like, this trailer looks terrible. But this movie completely understands the characters, and it builds and it builds and it builds, and I will say there's like a little 20-minute period right before the third act where it kind of hits the brakes a little too much. It's kind of like the getting the team together and figuring out how we're going to stop the monster sort of part building up to the finale, and it kind of lost me a little bit there. It was a little bit slower after the first hour and 20 minutes was just breakneck pace, awesome action, great character work. But when it does get to the finale, oh my god, the final fight in this movie, or the final battle, is unbelievable. I legitimately have never had the vibes at the beginning of a battle watching a movie since I've seen this movie.
So it begins.
It was just incredible. I was pumping my fist and jumping up. It was so awesome, and the whole final section is built up so amazingly. And ultimately, when you look at it on paper, if you were to read the final battle, it's super predictable. It's like, okay, yeah, this makes sense that it's going to go this way and then that way and then this is going to happen. But just watching it and how they edited it all together and the sound design and the visuals and the fact that you love the characters, not just the main characters, but the side characters are all great, and you're really, really rooting for them, and you know they're probably going to lose, or maybe they won't, but there's just so much hope and love with these characters because you care for them so much, and that makes it so it is a little bit unpredictable. And when you actually start to see the things that should be predictable happen, it's super satisfying still. And I will say there's one thing with the ending I don't love. They do a little bit of a cop-out. I'm not going to spoil it, obviously, but there's something that happens in the movie that sets a big emotional tone for the second half of the whole film, right? For the characters and for the world and everything. A big emotional tug, and they kind of just sort of undo that, and it doesn't really serve the story any purpose other than to be a reward for one of the characters that's in the story. One of the characters makes a decision, and this thing kind of being undone is sort of their reward for that decision. But whether that happened or not wouldn't have changed the character's arc or where they eventually ended up ultimately, like thematically at least. So I'm not really sure I 100% appreciated or thought that was a good way to go with the ending. But at the same time, I almost did shed a tear to it. So it was, I guess it worked for me. I also have to talk about the score, because what the fuck? I mean, I think secretly John Williams went to Japan and did this movie and didn't tell anybody and said, I don't want any credit. Give the credit to somebody else, because my lord, this score is unbelievable, and it sounds like something, I keep saying this movie feels like something that was made in the 70s, 80s, feels like something from my childhood, like a VHS movie, and the score is one of those reasons. It is so good. The theme of Godzilla every time it comes on screen, the theme when they're fighting and they're battling and they're hopeful, it's just as good as it could possibly get. And I'm gonna say it, there's been a lot of great scores this year. Obviously, we had Oppenheimer, we had Across the Spider-Verse, we've had so many great scores this year. Maestro, which isn't even out yet, but I've seen it, great score. So many great scores. This is the best one of the year. This is the best score of the year by far, easily. It's the one that just it shouldn't have been as good as it is, but it brought me so many memories of my childhood that I don't even know, like, they don't correspond with Godzilla. I've never been a big Godzilla movie person, but it just made me feel like a kid again. And I will say, when you look back, maybe I'll make a ranking. If you guys want to see a ranking of, like, the best monster movies ever, let me know. But I think this would probably be in the top 3. If you think of Jaws as a monster movie, and if you think of, like, Jurassic Park as a monster movie, I think this is right up there. This is going to be a classic, and this is one of the best movies, monster movies ever, and it's legitimately one of the 5 best movies of the year. When I make my top 10 list of the year, this movie's going to be in that top 5. It is amazing. Because of that, I'm going to give Godzilla -1 a 5 out of 5. I've been giving out so many 5s this year, so many 5s, and it's just because this year has been unreal, and this is just another amazing movie to go along in what's already, in my opinion, a historic year for film. So that's the video. Thank you for watching. Make sure to leave your comments down below. Make sure to like this video and subscribe. Make sure to turn on notifications and click the video on your screen. I'll see you guys in the next one.